So thank you so much for coming to Rhizome. And what we're going to try and do over the next 40 minutes is a quick overview of AI and robotics. I'm going to do that quick overview, and then I'm going to hand over to the world famous Clive Blacker, who's going to tell us all sorts of bits and pieces about what Clive's doing at the moment and some of the projects also I think we've got going on with Clive on nitrogen efficiency in wheat. And really some of the very, very state-of-the-art cutting edge stuff that's going on with Clive. So we're now also streaming to the world. So I don't know how many thousands are listening, but if you are listening, you're very welcome. And next time, come here because you get free sausage and a bacon sandwich. So we can't fit thousands in, but anyway. So thank you very, very much. So what I thought I would do to start with is give an overview on AI and robotics in agriculture. But really, it's a bit of an overview as to what's going on here at LIAT and some of the sort of the direction of travel that we've got going at the moment. And I thought I'd also make a few announcements because we've done some quite good things, which I think we're quite proud of. And I just wanted to just indicate what we're up to. First thing is we had some fantastic news. So last week, I was very fortunate to go to St. James's Palace. Jim knows the process from old. I went to St. James's Palace and were awarded Queen's Anniversary Prize for our work in agri-food technology, which is a very, well, it's absolutely fantastic thing. So you go to St. James's Palace and then that award is awarded by the monarch in February next year. So we all go to Buckingham Palace the year after. So I think it's fantastic recognition for a massive amount of teamwork that's gone on at Lincoln really since 2016-17. So it's seven years of labour which has gone into that. Many people, not just in the university, but in the community, in the farming community, and beyond. So we are very, very, very proud of that award. So that was event number one. But because the monarch gives the award, I thought I'd get the monarch to dial in this morning and just talk to us about the role of artificial intelligence in global role of basically artificial intelligence all over the world. And one of the big things that we're really trying to focus on is robotics, but also AI, so artificial intelligence, particularly in the food system. And unfortunately, Charles has dialed in for us to make a short announcement. You don't have to stand up, by the way. As I get to meet him in February, he's going to be really annoyed that.
We are witnessing one of the greatest technological leaps in the history of human endeavor. The rapid rise of powerful artificial intelligence is considered by many of the greatest thinkers of our age to be no less significant, no less important than the discovery of electricity, the splitting of the atom, the creation of the World Wide Web, or even the harnessing of fire.
So that was Charles. So it's very kind of him to do that. He didn't really, but no doubt we can talk to him about it in February. But really what we're talking about really is AI and the transformational impact of AI on all of us in all of society. And it's going to have a massive transformational effect across agriculture as well. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that LIAT, we are some of the leaders in the application of AI in agriculture and agricultural systems. And if you think about robotics, we have we're very, very well known for robotics. But what robotics are is really a physical manifestation of AI. So it's embedding AI in the control systems and the operating systems within those robotic systems. So from our robotics core, we have a very, very strong track record in AI. And these are technologies which are going to transform all of agriculture really over our lifetimes. The rate of progress is just absolutely extraordinary. And then it's getting noticed not just by Charles, but through the whole of politics. And you will have seen lots and lots of work on the Global AI Safety Summit and all those sorts of things. So not only is it a transformational technology, but it's also a technology which is giving concerns, hence Charles's comment. It's giving concerns about the future direction of the economy, society, and all sorts of things. It's pervasive, it's there already. And it's going to change the nature of work. And some of you will know that I did a piece of work, it's a DEFRA automation review, where I was co-chair with George in 2022. When you co-chair a review with a Secretary of State, they don't really do much of the work. You'll be all surprised. So the work is done by others. But George, I think, really did understand the technology, and he understood the impacts. And George wrote a very, very useful, very, very important article in the House magazine in Parliament this summer, 30th of June, where he's talking about the role of AI in agriculture and migration policy. And if you see the press at the moment, it's all around migration. And George was kind of interested, what is the role of AI on migration, not least because in agriculture, we're highly reliant on seasonal migrant workers. And there's been a very frustrating argument that those workers have been called low-skilled workers, which is just not the truth at all. But it's a very lazy political narrative that those people are low-skilled. Those people are actually incredibly high-skilled, but they've got different skills to what the people who say they're low-skilled think of as skills. So if you think of two different types of skills, you've got cognitive skills, that's your brain work skills. So think of lawyers, solicitors, and all those people are using cognitive skills. But think of the other form of skills, which is dexterous skills. And if you are a seasonal migrant worker, what skills are you using? Well, actually using your cognitive skills, but fundamentally using your dexterous skills. So hands, eye coordination, picking at speed. And most seasonal migrant workers, not only are they got high dexterous skills, but they've also got very high intrinsic fitness levels, similar to some of these people are athletes. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I could not. A lot of us in this room, I'd suggest, probably could not do that for fruit picking for a whole day, or flower picking, or whatnot. High levels of fitness. Now, roll it forward in the role of AI, and what's one hypothesis, and which is what George was saying, and I subscribe to, was that what may well happen in agriculture is AI may actually decrease the value of cognitive skills. So AI is a very, very powerful technique in terms of cognitive skills. So if you want to write a job description, most people these days go straight to ChatGPT and write it in seconds rather than spending hours on it. But where, so cognitive skills, relative AI can actually probably replace some of that load, but with dexterous skills, which is where robotics come in, it's really hard to do. And we've been working on selective harvesting in strawberries the last 5 to 6 years, and it's genuinely a very, very difficult technical problem. If you roll that forward, so you can see a world where there's a relative downgrade of cognitive skills, but an upgrade of the need for dexterous skills. So the whole migration debate, which was based on low-skilled, reverses. And this was George's argument, because we'll need people to do actual things in the real physical world in agriculture much, if not more than in the past. So AI will change the nature of work. And if anyone wants to read a very, very compelling argument, read George's article in the House magazine, where he's trying to make that an accessible argument, not just in agriculture, but across politics. And I think he did a really good job. So George is a good student of agriculture and very technically well-informed person. So why are we doing all this? So we're doing all this. Why are we interested in AI and robotics in agriculture? Well, the world's changing, and we had a steering board for our Centre for Doctoral Training on Monday. We had a very interesting debate. So I think when we set out on that CDT 4 years ago, we knew that there was all sorts of problems where robotics were needed, and that was seasonal migrant workers. We need to increase productivity, things like fruit and veg, so that people eat more of them, so that diets become healthier. Climate change in farming is a massive problem. I think everybody's now, I don't think there's any dissenters saying that this is not causing problems in farming. So all this sort of uncertainty, and where we were 4 years ago, we knew about this uncertainty, and we thought we'd get involved with robotics. But I think what's happened over the last 4 years is that whilst we're solving some of these problems slowly, the scale of these problems is getting worse and worse and worse, getting harder and harder and harder. And so the rate that we're coming up with solutions is not the same as the rate at which the problems are occurring. And so we need to go harder and harder and harder to solve these problems because they're getting away from us. And that applies in horticulture, seasonal picking, that includes in agriculture with arable crops and animal systems. So that the rate that these problems are going is worse than the rate that we're solving them. And so what we need on that basis is really step change, transformational technologies to accelerate the rate that we can attack these problems. And AI, we think, is one of the routes that we can look at. And I think this notion of rates is really important, and it's rates that we can solve these problems because they are getting away from us and we're not solving them fast enough. And that's not just a British problem, that is a global problem. We're not seeing science matching the problem space, the solutions to the problem space at the rate that we need it. So big problem. So it's very, very important that we keep going at these things, and AI, we think, is going to be, it won't be the panacea, but it will be another layer to help solve these things. So what are we doing at Lincoln? More or less, we split our research now in around 5 themes, and as everyone knows, we are very arable crops and horticulture based, but we're also getting moving more towards animal systems, really through collaboration. And we've got Elizabeth, who's here, and Simon. We've just got a new Centre for Doctoral Training, which is 60 PhDs, which is fantastic. I think it's £12 million of funding. Next generation of AI specialists, which includes Queen's University in Belfast, Aberdeen, and Strathclyde and Lincoln. So we're starting to see some real investment in training people to solve these problems, and part of that will start to move into animal challenges, particularly with Queen's and Strathclyde. But we are based on we're very much a crop focused group and horticulture focused group. And we've done sort of a number of things. So we've got 5 areas where we've been tackling the things. And the first thing, we do have some animal research, which is Spot the dog, and which is we have this little robot dog called Spot, which is 2 foot long, 2 foot tall. I was talking to Alan a bit earlier. I took him into Radio Lincolnshire about 2 weeks ago for a live interview on Radio Lincolnshire, and you're being interviewed with a live robot dog. And I think the adage, Alan, is don't do interviews with, was it children? I can't remember it. Children and animals. And I can now add to that, children, animals, and robot dogs. We had this thing careering around the studio, breaking things, but it came across really well. So that robot, it's a fun thing, really, but we've had it wandering through sugar beet fields, finding insect traps, and then there's a camera in its head, and it's been identifying aphids and insects within traps in sugar beet fields. It's a very cool bit of tech. But it's a really cool bit of tech, not because it's a bit of a tech, but it's because it's a very interesting thing to try and attract new people into our world. And part of the role here is trying to get new people into the university. Spot the dog, it's from a science point of view, it's probably a little bit gimmicky, but from a public perception, it's fantastic. And what we need to do is not just be techie and solve all these problems. We've got a responsibility to try and attract new people into this world, and these sorts of things are fantastic to do that. We've got a huge amount on productivity. So we've got some very big grants from DEFRA. We've got a £5 million grant called Open Core, and that's really trying to step change agri-robotics for selective harvesting. And we're working with some of the biggest, most important SMEs in the UK in this space, people like Saga, Dogtooth, Z-Helm, and so very, very cutting-edge SMEs trying to drive this selective harvesting problem. And that's a £5 million grant. And the idea of that grant is where Lincoln provide free software, open software to all these SMEs, because all these SMEs are so small, but the challenge is big, that they need to collaborate to actually share code, share information so that it can solve these problems. So it's around creating a collaborative community to solve these robotic problems. So that's probably that's our biggest ongoing grant at the moment. Then we have a big piece on sustainability. And then I think we've probably mentioned this one before. We're very, very lucky to have a flux tower, carbon flux tower, this one on our site. It's about 3 fields over that way towards towards Lincoln. And this machine can measure the carbon flux. Everybody's talking about carbon across a whole field. And we got this idea actually from a farmer's breakfast we had here about 3 years ago with UK Centre for Ecology. And a guy called Ross Morrison came in and told us about what UKCH were doing in terms of these instruments. It was the most well-attended breakfast we'd had. I think that 80 people came for breakfast. UKCH came in, told us about these machines. And so we contacted UKCH after that farmer's breakfast and bought one, well, with some Research England funding, about 100 grand, I think it is. And it's just sat in a field, and we're just measuring a whole rotation, carbon flux over a whole rotation, getting some real data. And we're a little bit frustrated that in this world, carbon measurements are very important. There's now 82 different carbon models, carbon farm tools and all those sorts of things. 82, but very little primary data. So this is one of the few arable crop systems where there's primary data. And we had Mark Spencer, the minister, here in the summer. We showed Mark the data, and it's some of the first data he's seen, took the data away, and now the mantra from DEFRA is they want to see more primary data on these sorts of mechanisms. So it's we're starting to have an impact. So there is primary data there, but you're not going to have one of those on every farm at 100 grand each. Yeah, so the question then is, how do we scale that information? And we have a big thing on phenotyping, which Reshmi and Ravi here, I don't know. Yeah, Reshmi over there. And that's where we've got robots in the field, wandering around, taking images of wheat. And one of the biggest problems with wheat breeding is how do you scale it? And it's still very reliant on people with clipboards, usually students, going around thousands of plots saying that's good, that's bad, that's good, that's bad. So what we're trying to do is put science into that. So we've got some very sophisticated sensors on that robot, and that's starting to have an impact. So we have a PhD student here, Yoon, who's already shown different traits which can increase wheat yield by about 5%. So, and that's using high precision equipment to look at the drivers for yield in wheat. So, which is just not possible with humans. So it's a 5% increment in yield, but we're pretty certain it's correct because of the data scale and the instruments we're using on that robot. And wheat is a crop where if you get a 5% increase in yield, that's a step change in yield. So it's data science and AI which is actually delivering that. So we'll see how that progresses. And then the next, the bit that's most important of all is people. And this is a photograph from Dave Blacker, Clyde's Brothers workshop, which I attended this summer. It was a farm walk, where there's community farmers talking about wheat and wheat yield and some of the stuff that Dave is doing on his farm. And the next really important piece here is really people and how people interact with these technologies. and we strengthened the team with Louise Manning, who's probably online but not here, to really sort of look at the barriers to adoption to some of these technologies, and that's the next big thing. And then there's a really interesting piece around using AI to understand farmers' behaviour, which Elizabeth leads. So that's where it's going. So those are driving outcomes. And then as we've gone on, so we've had our traditional focus on horticulture, but we've pivoted more recently towards arable crops, and we're really proud of three particular projects. This project at the top is funded by Lincoln Agri Robotics, which is our £6.9 million programme grant from UKRI, and that's the wheat work where we've shown new traits that can drive wheat yield, and this is some of the imagery that you get from the sensor, and that's the sensor itself. Reshma and I have got a project called HyperNUE, which is an international project with Australian National University and University of Sydney. And Clive and I went to Sydney in July this year, and both of us came away with a significant project to drive productivity in wheat. And this one's using hyperspectral imaging, and it's really amazing. So you get a leaf clamp, you can stick a leaf clamp on a wheat canopy, you can instantly detect its nitrogen use efficiency and also the likely productivity of a different variety. So we're trying to test that equipment in the UK, and that's a straight transfer from Australian National University into the UK, and it's a group that Reshma used to work with before she came to Lincoln. So it's very international, and that's what we really want. And then the next biggest project is FINE, which is a framework for improving nitrogen efficiency, and that one's led by Clive and Jim at Ag Analyst, but that's to drive nitrogen use efficiency in wheat, the big question on input cost, productivity, and environmental things. But I think, Clive, you're going to mention that, aren't you? So I'm not going to steal Clive's thunder. I wouldn't steal his thunder because I'll get it wrong, he'll get it right, and it'll be so getting more focus on arable crops. But technology alone is not the panacea, and I think that came across. We did this in the automation review with DEFRA, and that was in July 2022. And I think at that time there was this sort of notion that technology will solve all problems, and that was one of the mantra. And certainly the Home Office in the United Kingdom was saying, I need robots, I need technology, and then I'll reduce the number of licenses for agricultural workers in the UK. So that was the political background for the review. And I think from the review sort of really said, well, actually technology won't solve all your problems, it will help, but don't walk away from your responsibility, Home Office, to agriculture. And so the recommendation number one was around long-term seasonal workers quotas, and they've started to do that now. It's 55,000 from, I think, 35,000 when we started, but it's a longer-term view. We talked about other things, so infrastructure on farms to adopt this tech. So they're reviewing now telecoms things. We talked about regulatory gaps. They've funded work to look at the regulation gaps. So they've taken this very, very seriously. And we've also asked for tens of millions of pounds for a mission project to try and really get to grips with some of these problems. So we're still waiting to hear on that one, but we hope that might come up. So technology alone is not the panacea; it's about the whole thing. But it's really nice when you get into government and they initiate it. These things take years; they're slow things, but they do listen. I think the other great thing is we're starting to see shoots of adoption on farms. I've been at these things for the last sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it was 5 years ago I went to a conference in Chichester with lots of farmers, and they said, when are we going to have these robots? And they said, I said about 5 years. Well, that was fairly safe. Anyway, the buggers invited me back 5 years later. And I'll show you the response I got in a minute. So hold me to account. But 5 years have gone on since we started this work. We're starting to see green shoots. And these are businesses that we've been involved with or we're aware of, which are really exciting, certainly in the horticulture space and partly in the agriculture space, which is trying to So Forval, lots of people know about that. Saga Robotics. They're now got UV robots on farms in Kent. I think 10 farms in Kent applying UV to stop powdery mildew. They've done 40,000 kilometres of autonomy, 1 lap of the world to an accuracy of 5 centimetres this year alone. So very, very sophisticated autonomy. That autonomy stack came from Lincoln. So the primary IP, which enabled that company, was founded here from our robotics group in School of Computer Sciences, which Simon now heads, which was developed over many years, Mark Hanhide. Very, very advanced technology. And we have Fruitcast, which is a spin out from Lincoln, which Jim helped in the Ceres program, which is really taking off at speed. Richard Williamson's the CEO, but the person behind it is a young guy called Raymond Tunstall. Raymond did his degree here, and then he went on to a PhD here, and he's now founded Fruitcast, which is using AI for fruit forecasting. So absolutely state-of-the-art farm company, world-class, and they're hosted in the Eagle Lab, which Lisa represents over there. And Lisa was fantastic in helping getting that business started. And then the third one, which is interesting, is Dogtooth. They're picking strawberries, probably the most advanced picking robot in the world. They've got their robots in Lincolnshire. There's 12 of them been picking fruit at a very well-known farm. The owner makes vacuum cleaners. You can't say hoovers because that would be bad. But Dogtooth's been trying their robots on that site, and that's fantastic to see that come into Lincolnshire. And we're now helping Dogtooth build their autonomy stack, similar to what we've done with Forvald. Now, I ring-fence those 3 companies because on Monday, the government's holding a global investment summit, and there's going to be 200 C-suite CEOs who will meet these companies, 200, including Bill Gates and Rishi Sunak. It's been held in Hampton Court. It's one of the biggest investment summits in the UK, and there's 13 companies who's at that event across the whole of the UK, and that is McLaren, Williams, Oxford Quantum, Tokamak, which is the fusion power thing, and those 3 companies. So it's quite extraordinary that 3 of those companies are at that event out of 13. So we're really, really proud of that and our association with those companies. Some of our tech is getting really worldwide focus. So we'll see how that goes. Last year, there was $2 billion of investment came out of that summit. So if, Lisa, Fruitcast get a hit, you can put their rent up. so we'll see how it comes. And then other ones we work with, Garford, who you know, which is robotic hoeing. I think they're just going great. They're just selling machines. They're doing great things. Muddy Machines we're working with on asparagus harvesting. Garicus Robotics is another one of our spin-outs. I'm the interim CEO of that one. That's mushroom picking robots. That's working with G's. Their first robots will be on a farm in February, March. So we wish them all the best. Zehan we work with, that's tomato picking robots. We've done some work with Eco Robotics. That's a Swiss company, which is, again, it's robotic spot sprayers. Very, very good company now coming into the UK for sugar beet and onions and veg, mainly sugar beet, Eco Robotics. And then the other thing I'm quite interested in, we have no association with Advanced Farm, but Elizabeth will see them in Seattle in about 2 weeks. There's a global leadership thing on agri-robotics in Seattle. They're based in Seattle. And these are really interesting because they're an apple picking robot company, but they've had a 20 million investment from Case New Holland. So it's the first time we've seen a big ag company investing in this space. We want to see more of that. So that's encouraging in terms of future investment. So we're starting to see this. There's about 300 agri-robotics in horticulture now in the UK. So from 0 5 years ago. So our next thing we can contribute, and this is our next biggest project, which is called Linkham, which is this one. And then with our friends at Cambridge, we have a really good relationship with Cambridge in many ways, not least Cambridge Enterprise. And Cambridge Enterprise have got world-class track record in starting new companies, spin-outs, got high profile in the spin-out review, which was announced this week. And then we're learning from Cambridge Enterprise how to create new companies. So Fruitcast and Agaricus came out of that Cambridge relationship, and really because of our friends at Cambridge. And Jim's the chair of the investment committee of Ceres as well. So that's a great mechanism where academics pitch to an industry body an idea to try and create spin-outs or licenses. So it's not like a grant. It's actually a very different mechanism where we're trying to change the behaviour of academics to understand that there are other funding mechanisms. If you want to develop impact, create spin-outs or licenses, you need to take a different approach. So it's very, very industry-led, and it's been very successful and created those two companies and other opportunities. And this new initiative is really the government's levelling up strategy, saying how do we level up science and engineering? And this is a funded by EPSRC, so the Engineering Science Research Council, and they've allocated £5 million new tranche of money for Ceres, which is where any British university can apply anywhere, the whole of the UK, but the impact has got to be in our region, which is Greater Lincolnshire and North Cambridgeshire, so really arable and horticulture farming. And then with very close partnerships with Greater Lincolnshire LET, so Effie's keeping us in order from the LET, West Lindsey District Council, got two colleagues here from the council today. On the governing body, we'll have Sally Greenwell-Smith from the council helping us with that, and the CPCA council in Cambridge. So local things. We're starting to see these local initiatives coming up, and you can see the commonality. This is Lincoln Cathedral farming, Ely Cathedral farming. So we've got this common economic geography. And then my final two slides. So I'm always asked, when will robots take over? What everybody's spooked about in AI is this notion of what they call artificial general intelligence, when a computer has the intelligence of a human, and it's coming really fast. And there's a debate when it's going to come. Maybe it's here already. We don't know. But that's artificial general intelligence, when computers hit human level of reasoning. ChatGPT isn't an intelligent thing, but the next step is real intelligence. And then we had in 2021, we had some of our robots who went to Downing Street. This gentleman was the Prime Minister at the time, and I argue, if anyone's seen Doctor Who, where these sort of things come in and sort of invade Downing Street, well, we had this robot trying to get in the door. I reckon he took over, and probably, yeah, very intelligent robot and a Prime Minister. So Tom the Angry Robot. So I did this talk with Minette Batters about 2 weeks ago, and I was invited back to the conference where I said 5 years ago, when will robots take over? And I thought, well, they're going to hold me to account. So I thought, well, this time, rather than me answering that question, I thought I'd get a robot to answer the question. And so I put a prompt into ChatGPT and said, when will robots take over agriculture? And I thought it was absolutely uncanny. And so while automation and robotics will continue to play an increasing role in agriculture, will likely be a gradual process. It may take more than 5 years for them to significantly transform the industry. Farmers and agricultural business will adopt these technologies to become more practical, cost-effective, and well-suited to their specific needs. Human labour will likely remain an integral part of agriculture, complementing automation to improve efficiency and productivity. So that was from a ChatGPT. So I thought, well, actually, rather than me, a human saying when robots going to take over, I'll get a robot to actually say it. And then somebody in the audience said, well, it's probably read your report and it's what you said. That's actually dead right. So that's it. So thanks very much. So that's the future of travel. We're really, really excited what's going on. So I think we're very much just at the start of this massive journey. And then coming back to what I said earlier, we've got this problem space going that direction, the solution space going that direction. We've got to step it up, and that's the challenge for the next 5 years. So thank you very much. Right, I'm going to now, what we're going to do, we're going to take questions at the end, if that's all right. And I'm now going to introduce my friend Clive Blacker, who many will know. And Clive's been very, very active in one of the ambassadors for AgTech in the UK for many, many, many years in terms of lots of things. Clive was really one of the brains and the muscle behind Hands-Free Hectare and Hands-Free Farm, I think it's fair to say. And Clive's here to talk about next step, which is the work that's going on nitrogen use efficiency in wheat. So hand over to Clive. Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks Simon. It was very reassuring to see Simon's technical ability at work this morning, and the minute something went wrong, he immediately stepped back. So I'm going to talk to you this morning very briefly about one of the projects that we're involved with Lincoln, which is the nitrogen use efficiency, trying to help farmers profit from better nitrogen management. It's something I've been quite passionate about. For those of you that know me, I've been involved in variable rate nitrogen since 1992, if not before then, and it's something that I'm still striving to get right in some cases. So what we're going to talk about this morning is the problem of nitrogen, the challenge that we've got to overcome to try and improve it, and then talk about the solution that we're developing with a number of different innovative businesses through the Innovate process with NUE Profits, the project we've got. Obviously, the significant problem we've got that we're all increasingly aware of is greenhouse gases, and that's more related to climate change and the issue and impact that's having with us in how we grow crops and the seasonal variability that we've got with the climate and the weather, and how we then deal with that. As farmers, we're accused of causing part of the problem, and we're not exactly scot-free in that side. But from an arable perspective, if I look at my carbon footprint, then the one I've got to worry about is nitrogen. And nitrous oxides are probably the one that are sort of 296 times more potent than CO2. And 83% of the greenhouse gases I produce from my growing of cereals and oilseed rapeseed, according to the HDB, come from nitrogen fertilizer and the use of it alone. So that's the biggest win I've got to try and overcome it. In the UK, currently, we're about 60% use efficient with our nitrogen. So for every £100 we're investing in nitrogen, we're only getting £60 back from that. And that is something that I think when you start putting it into financial terms is something that we've overlooked as an industry. And it staggers me that we aren't using that as more of a metric about how profitable we're using the products we use, rather than looking at some of the other statistics sometimes. And obviously that's causing some unsustainable issues around the environment. 45% of the nitrogen we lose is estimated to leach into our watercourses. The other 55% disappears into the atmosphere or soil somewhere else. And trying to understand all of that is a real challenge. So we've got some real big hurdles to try and overcome to try and improve what we're doing, because we're technically also one of the leading global producers and most efficient producers of cereals in the world. The challenge that we've got is that research would suggest that 70 to 80% nitrogen use efficiency is achievable. And clearly, what we've proven in some of the trials we've done at the early stages is that we can actually achieve a lot better than that as well. But how can we systematically improve it? How do we help farmers maintain that yield and protein? Because yield is still ultimately the king to achieving better use efficiency, making sure we get more with the less products that we apply, or better still. The challenge we've got is when's the best time to apply it and exactly how much? And that's the challenge we're trying to address with the project. So what we're trying to do is demonstrate how to improve nitrogen use efficiency in every season. And what we're trying to reduce is the risk of mining maybe the soil, so I'm not too concerned about that, but as we're moving into more regenerative agriculture processes, as we're moving into different ways of managing our soils to try and sequester carbon, we're getting more biologically active soils, we're moving into areas that we really don't have the same levels of research that we might do for the physical and the chemical aspects of what we understand about soil. So we need some sort of fresh thinking. Now, I said this already, why is nitrogen use efficiency not already a metric that we should be using? One of the things that we've got to be clear about is if we're going to introduce a new metric is that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. And not all NUE that's quoted is the same. And I just want to be really clear about how we interpret this within our project, and I think how the industry should look at this as well. So you'll see I've got a couple of different scenarios here. So NFUE, for those of you that are in agriculture that want to measure this, the nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency that I calculate is the total amount of nitrogen I supply to the crop through manures and through fertilizers against anything that's removed in the straw, grain and protein from that crop. That's a simple mass balance sort of approach. It's how much nitrogen I apply and how much then that crop's taken off, and I look at the balance between it. If we want to calculate proper NUE, then we need to take the soil into account. But there's no guidelines to a farmer on where the depth of that analysis should be and how much they measure. And in the case of the project, we're doing our best to measure our NUE to 60 centimetres. That's why I put NUE 60. But one caveat I would have to that is that the more we measure, the worse our NUE may appear. And I think we need to be very careful about how we interpret that, because if we are trying to find more nitrogen in the soil so we can make better use of it at deeper depths, for example, down to 90 centimetres, if you're lucky enough to have soil that deep, then we shouldn't necessarily be penalising a farmer and making him look worse because he's actually trying to do a better job. Because he's finding more nitrogen at deeper depths, then we need to be very careful about how we present that. But I do think we need some standards in place as an industry where we can properly calculate our nitrogen use efficiency, and that means we take the total amount of nitrogen that we've supplied to the crop. We're also measuring what might be in the soil, and we measure that then against everything that we're taking off the crops. There's different calculators available, and I'm going to come back to this slide a bit later. But you can see in this particular example, I've applied 216 kilos of nitrogen to the soil. There was 55 kilos of nitrogen already in the soil. My crop yielded 10.1 tonnes with a grain protein of 11.3%, and I've removed therefore 200 kilos of nitrogen. So there's 71 kilos of nitrogen somewhere floating around in the system that's unaccounted for. And I'll come back to this later, but you'll still see that the nitrogen use efficiency in that example is 74%, and that's 14% higher than the UK average. If you depending which reports you read, and as Simon said, there's 80 different carbon calculators. The World Wildlife Fund released a report and said UK use efficiency was 55%. So it does vary depending on what you read. But I'll come back to this later because it's quite interesting. Now, I started this journey sort of 5 or 6 years ago. We were trying to get better use of nitrogen, and we weren't really looking at use efficiency. And it wasn't until I calculated the use efficiency that I was absolutely horrified. So in 2016, we did a trial, and I calculated that our use efficiency in nitrogen was only 56%. And it really frightened me that thinking of 46% of the nitrogen that I've applied to those crops has disappeared somewhere. I can't account for it, and it's my biggest single cost to the crop. And you can see just by measuring that we've improved the farm nitrogen use efficiency. In the farm practice, the farm standard is the sort of blue lines. So in 2020, we started looking at how we could alter different interventions with nitrogen rates and with different nitrogen timing approaches. And you can see we've had some big impacts where we've got nitrogen use efficiency up to 91%, 97%, and 90%. Now, that isn't always without a yield loss. There are some costs involved in it at times, and we need to overcome those. And we're learning that very, very quickly with the trials that we're doing. And it's really difficult to achieve. And what we're sort of seeing is one of the things that we do see is that biologically active soils are certainly more resilient to different changes and approaches in nitrogen management. And it's something we need to understand and manage more effectively. So we've got complex decisions to make when we're applying our nitrogen. And this slide's just sort of showing the variation. The dark black line you can see here is our crop uptakes of nitrogen versus then the different varying levels of nitrogen within the soil. So we measure the soil at the start of the season in February. As the plants grow, it reduces, or as that might leach out in some cases. We make an application of fertilizer, it goes up, the plants then use that, we make another application. What we've got to try and do is balance this. And this is something we're trying to do in our project. And what you'll also see, and I'll come back to this bit later, is this mineralisation that occurs through the season and will increase. The decisions we've got to make aren't simple, based on the climate, based on our soils, based on our textures, what might already be in the soils and the forms of nitrogen we're using. And the reason we started looking at this is we were seeing yield losses after cover crops. We were sort of trying to understand what's going on with the breakdown of the cover crops, and is that causing the effect that we think it might be in terms of absorbing available nitrogen from the soil to break down the cover crops. And the best way to sort of show you this is in this slide here. So you can see we've got quite high nitrogen levels in the soil. We add some organic residue into the soil, and you can see the microbial activity comes in to try and break the residues down, which absorbs the nitrogen from the soil, putting us into a deficit position. But at some point, this will all then break down and we'll get a mass flush. And what we didn't understand is when this was occurring or how it was quite occurring. And this is what we were sort of thinking we would try and explore with our testing at the time. Obviously, with changing climate, then this has a big impact on the levels of mineralisation we get. And this is something that we're learning a little bit about and have a lot more to learn in terms of how the mineralisation approaches. But depending on the soil temperatures, we get very different effects in terms of peak load of mineralisation at different times of the year. So it's something that we need to be really, really mindful of. And it's having a big influence in the project and what we find. So the solution to the problems are the project that we've then put into place. So we've got this NUE Profits project, and what we're trying to do with the project is develop a framework for improving nitrogen use efficiency. We want to try and develop the best in class. So our initial approach is to try and get the best average rate for your fields with the best timing that's possible, with a plan to look at putting it in the right part of the field as well. So we're doing it in small scale for a field average, but what we really want to have an eye on is how we can introduce variable rate into this or take better use of existing variable rate equipment to make sure the information that we're putting into those systems calibrates it properly and allows us to get the best out of it. We're trying to get the best optimal nitrogen requirements based on each site and help the growers with a decision-making process to do that. And the way we're doing that is through nitrogen uptake measurements that we're going to take from the plant throughout the season, through remote sensing from space, with in-field sensors that Simon's helping and the team at Lincoln here developing in terms of novel and new sensor technology that's already available in phones. Looking at in-field crop nitrogen sensors in terms of both canopy and soil. So we'll have soil moisture and temperature probes in the soil to help us understand the soil parameters, water supply, and also then with some prototype nitrate sensors. We're technologically agnostic. So if anybody's got any technology they want to bring in and test, we would love to have it in the project, because what we're trying to do is build a system that will inform the farmer with the best technology available. So we don't really care whose technology it is. So if any of you have got any technology you think would be beneficial, then please bring it along and we can help you with that. So the concept is that we've got lots of inputs. We'll be looking at the costs, earth observation, yield maps, the different MET forecasts, environmental systems, LiDAR, canopy growth models, and leaf nitrogen measurements, and the different fertilizers that we're using. Now, typically, a lot of this information and data sets have been held in different disparate systems. What we're aiming to do within the project is put them into one dashboard, so that we have a dashboard that will provide two functions. The first function will be highlighting the inputs and how we're using them. It will allow us then to measure those outputs and then derive some outcomes. And in terms of the stages of that, we'll have a dashboard that will give us in-season, live, daily, topical nitrogen information about the status of our crops and that crop growth and our soil conditions. After harvest, we'll be able to measure the full outputs, the impact of those, and the profitability of those, with some outcomes that we're also trying to develop into the system in how we can actually benefit climatically, environmentally, and profitability-wise through enhanced finance schemes that different companies may be interested in purchasing into, such as getting water companies to try and help us underwrite some of the costs that might be involved, or help you profit more from the decisions that you're making with those investments, and to promote best practice. So what we've been doing is we've had some very small plot trials, so literally a 24-metre grid square in a field. This is targeted to the average point of the field, so we're looking for the bog standard average bit, the bit that always does reasonably well, not the best bit, not the worst bit, because they tend to be variables. And we've implemented a data cube approach here in 3 dimensions. So we've taken all our information from one place in very high resolution, in a very high detail, so that we don't have any corruption in terms of field variability, soil variability. It's all from a known area. What we've done is we've done intensive sampling. So we start off in February by doing soil N tests, 0 to 30, 30 to 60. We're doing those for nitrogen, for carbon, for broad spectrum nutrients, and organic matter. And we're also testing within there a newer sort of test that we introduced this season, which is an additional available nitrogen test, so the nitrogen plus analysis. What this is allowing us to do is estimate how much nitrogen might mineralize within the season, which is a sort of newer test that's coming out. The aim is that we're using the plants as the sensors in these places, and historically we've been using the ERN tester or SPAD meter to allow us to measure the canopy on a weekly basis. So it's been quite time intensive to gather the data over the last 4 or 5 years. We've also put soil sensors in place to look at soil moisture and temperature, and we get these sort of readings from those. So you can see 4 different depths of soil moisture, 6 different soil temperature sensors within the soil at that point. And what we then tried to do is support these with in-season tissue analysis, post-analysis then in terms of the grain, the straw. So we've got a full 3-dimensional picture of the full yield, the full grain profile, the full straw profile, so we can see exactly where the nitrogen distribution is in the crops, in the plants that we've got. And then we've replicated, well, we haven't replicated, but we've had then different treatments at farm practice versus then the intervention. And this is typically what the data looks like, and it's quite interesting to see some of the things. The one thing that does stick out is that no 2 seasons are the same. And it doesn't matter what you think you might have learnt in one season, it can bite you totally on the arse in another season. And I've got 2 arse cheeks and they've both been bitten in the last 2 years. So I'm hoping that it's not going to get done a 3rd time. Essentially what we're showing on here is basically the yellow pixels on here are our rainfall. The red pixels on here are the leaf nitrogen concentrations as measured with the N tester, and the blue lines are the application of fertilizer. In this case, what we're trying to achieve is somewhere in the, what I'm trying to get is my crop canopy, if it's got sufficient nitrogen in it, should be in a place at about 650 on the scale here on the left-hand, on your left-hand side. And you can see when I'm testing here, even though the crop's had 91 kilos of nitrogen applied to it, plus what's in the soil, it's still deficient. So I've got a nitrogen deficiency coming into this crop because I've had no rainfall. The crop's growing away as best it can, but it can't pick the nitrogen up from the soil. But what we did was we timed our nitrogen application around a forecast rain event and a known deficiency, and rightly or wrongly, we stuck another 100 kilos of nitrogen on, which was probably far too much. But what we could see with the technologies was in 3 to 6 days, we can actually see it then getting into the plant, which is quite reassuring to see that the sort of system was working. So if you remember 2020, 2021, we were in lockdown. It was a fantastic spring. It was nice and mild. Conditions were good for growing. There was nobody about. It was peaceful. It was great to be a farmer. If we roll on 12 months, and we then look at what happened in year 2021, we had a similar dry period. We changed our strategy slightly, thinking we'd overdone the first dose of nitrogen. We thought we'd apply more nitrogen again, in this case when the rain had come, and again we're in a deficiency position. We applied 55 kilos of nitrogen on a bigger rainfall event, and bugger me, nothing happened for 22 days. And this was totally related, we think, to soil temperatures, that we're applying nitrogen in conditions where the plants can't get it up. And it's one of the challenges that we have, is trying to understand the technology in terms of nitrogen sources that we should perhaps be using to get it into the crop when the crop needs it. Because one thing that is happening, particularly in cold soils, and this season, this was ammonium nitrate, so you'd think it would have got in. It didn't, and it took us, we made another application fairly quickly because we were seeing deficiencies still occurring. And you can see it took it a long time to catch up. So, one of the things we're learning is that the soil temperature is hugely important. And this was the sort of data that we were getting. Every time we saw the soil temperatures below 10 degrees on the sensors that we're measuring, we're seeing a drop in the plant ability to take nitrogen up and a deficiency sort of system occurring, that the plant is trying to grow, but it can't get the nitrogen out of the ground in those conditions. So it's one of the factors that will become a core component, we think, within the recommendation system as we build it. The other aspect that we're doing is around then how we can integrate remote sensing. And one of the tools that we're looking is this Acropolis tool that's been developed by a company called Assimila. And this is a crop modeling system. And what you can see is that we've got lots of different scenarios in terms of possible outcomes for our crop growth. The red line is then modeling what's actually happening within the growing season as the season occurs, and as we take more and more remote sensing measurements. And you can see the canopy developing on your right. And I'll play this a couple of times because it's quite a fascinating thing to watch. So the idea being that we've got a real-time decision-making system that will take account of the models, the data feeds that we're collecting from the field to allow us to recommend better use of nitrogen. Now, one of the key things to look at on here is that what I like about this is that we've got a predicted and an observed yield in this case. We've got the benefit of hindsight here. So you can see predicted at one point in time, 10.8 tons, and it was actually 10.9 tons. So it was pretty close. This graph here is quite important if we want to monitor how this is doing within the season. And essentially the bit that I'm interested in is really only the bit from the 19th of the 3rd to the 19th of the 5th, because that's where we're making the majority of our nitrogen decisions. What we can see here is the observed yield band is the pink line here. The estimate of where we think the yield is going to be within the season is the dotted line. So you can watch that again through the season. You'll see that from the start of the season, if it's going to play again, sorry. Go back one. It should play again, he says. There we go. You'll see that it's within there. It gets a lower yield expectation, and here we're in November. As we get into the point of January coming into, you can see it's in the right ballpark. As we start the season, it's where we sort of think it should be. We're overestimating slightly, then it comes back in line, and then we might overestimate a lot at the end. But once we're through that main period, I'm not too concerned with the overestimation. So it's going to give us a great opportunity, hopefully, to look at how we can use these new technologies with the different sensors combined with crop models. Because one of the challenges I think we've always had with remote sensing is the remote sensors, it's like a consultant. They come and tell us what we already know, but we don't help it by telling it what we know, where we could actually infer and improve the decision-making process. So this is the first time we've shown this. This was born last week. And this is just a guide of what we're going to be showing farmers this season. So essentially, we've got our soil levels of nitrogen here that we can measure. We're then modelling that against our crop growth from the similar data. We're capturing autonomously from weather stations and data systems the rainfall, which is the blue lines, and then we're combining solar radiation and remote sensing data to ground truth these and pull them together. So it's interesting. You can see even at the start of January, we're running into deficiency symptoms potentially with the crop modelling that we've put in place so far. You can see the interventions of nitrogen. And what we're trying to do is time this bit better so that we don't get a lot of this where we've got huge excesses of nitrogen in a place where the crop can't use it. We need to be an approach where we apply the nitrogen in advance of the crop running short, but not making it deficient where it might lose yield. And then what we have is a dashboard that we can show then at harvest, that we can pull all the data in from the application data and the yield maps and the other technology that we've got that will allow us then to compare the total amount of nitrogen that we've applied with different factors. And in here you can see I'm comparing the nitrogen I've applied to the yield. And essentially I've got a nitrogen response function for every square metre on that field. What you can see is that my optimum is somewhere in the region of about 160, 175, 180 maybe. In this particular case, we've applied 200 kilos of nitrogen. We've taken off 168 kilos, and I've got a nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency of 84%. Simon's just given me a minute warning, so I'll quickly run through, but you can see every field's different. We've got a different peak in this field. We've got a different peak in this field. But we have achieved a fertiliser recovery here in this particular one of 103%. So it's quite interesting how the different technologies are allowing us to do it better. Now, I said I'd quickly come back to our use efficiency calculator. I've mentioned these figures before. What I wanted to highlight here was this was in 2022. So when we did our NCORs on a 0 to 60, we had 55 kilos of nitrogen in the soil. We applied 216 kilos. We thought we'd done particularly well because the crop yield and protein, 10.12 tonnes at 11.3% protein. We removed 203 kilos of nitrogen. It gave us a nitrogen recovery of fertiliser at 93%. A total nitrogen use efficiency calculation gave us 74%, but what we learned this year, which was the first year we actually did a 0 to 30 analysis after harvest, was that we still had 137 kilos of nitrogen in the soil. So we were quite horrified that we've used our nitrogen very effectively, we thought. You could account maybe for 80 kilos of that, but we aren't sure where the other 60 came from because of the mineralisation process. So, we're learning every year with this. What I can say is this year, the trials that we put in place, we haven't seen this big excess. This was just, I think, a seasonal thing. It's not often we measure this. We're not encouraged to, and it's expensive to do it, but it's turned out to be quite interesting. And what we think is that this is the mineralisation part, and this is the mineralisation area is the key part that we're trying to establish when it's occurring, how much is occurring, so we can rely on that rather than extra fertiliser. These are the project partners. If any of you want to get involved, here's our website.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So what we'll do now, just for 5 minutes, is open up some questions, if that's all right. David's right in there. Go for it.
Clive, where are you measuring your soil temperature from? Or are you taking a mean from the profile? And just before you answer, the main reason I ask is that looking at the multi-depth profile with potato growth that we're working with, it often takes until late May and June before there's any mean response to the temperature at depth.
Yeah, so the temperature readings that we have on the probe, there's 6 of them going down to 50 centimetres. They're at 10 centimetre spacings. Essentially, we're looking at the top 10 centimetre one. That's the one we think is in the most biologically active part of the soil. That's the bit that's driving the majority of the nutrient exchange between what we apply, the biological reactions with the bacteria in the soil to get the nitrogen into the forms that plants can take it up. And that's where we think it's most important. But it's one of the things that we're going to look at is the relationship between all of them within the project. But and it's all anecdotally. This is just me comparing it on graphs. I've now got some really clever people involved that are far cleverer than I am, that will hopefully put some proper numbers to it and do proper analysis on it and probably explain it to me in a way I can't understand.
So at 10 centimetres, do you feel that the diurnal effect of day and night impacts your data excessively?
Yeah, that's still something to look at. If I go back to the slide with it on, and I'm afraid I've got arrows all over it, you can see the effect it's got on here. So this is the orange, the purple one is the top. So you can see great fluctuations in day. We're getting readings every 15 minutes from these things. We're just sort of taking an average from the blue one, really. And it was the sort of blue one that we were looking at in terms of the soil.
Yeah, thank you.
You can see the variability as the probes as the temperature get lower. That obviously, I don't need to tell you that.
Where do you think this leaves RB209 then?
Well, look, RB209 is a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
In absence of being bothered to go and test and do things properly.
Yeah.
It gives you a great starting place to go from. So what we're trying to do with this is enhance the RB209 and take it to a different level.
Yeah.
We're very much engaged with the HDB and hoping to get them involved. And we would like to get the trials set up in a perspective that the RB209 could take advantage of the learnings that we're actually getting with that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant.
One Simon, how much more investment do you think you will require two statements to actually get a solution for free? And the next one is, the academics, I presume, are developing the software and the machines.
Yeah.
Has anything been done with the practical tickets to record exactly how they do it and then put that into the software?
Yeah.
So going from that forward, is it the way?
Learning from people. Yeah,
Yes.
that's, yeah. The Agri Open Core was put together really, so it's a £5 million DEFRA intervention. I think these guys probably wouldn't. So it's a £5 million DEFRA intervention, and we recognise when we put it together, what we're trying to do is the critical thing for these robots is to get human cost parity. So it's not about rate picking or anything like that for a farmer. It's about cost parity, and in fact, it's about improving cost over human workers. So and the idea of Open Core is to get some robotic systems over the line in the next 2 years to human cost parity. I think we've got to step change it up about 5-fold at the moment. So we've got a 5x challenge to get to human cost parity. Will we get that? It's pretty ambitious. And it might take more time, it might take a bit more funding. But we're starting to, we're on that journey, we're getting there. What worries me is the funding space. So lots of the funding is from DEFRA, which is fantastic, from Farm Innovation funding. That has to be matched by private sector investment. And that's not farms, that's venture capital and private equity. And that's the bit that worries me. So we've seen some agri-robotic difficulties. So small robot company, it's widely known, they've not quite gone where they want to go. That's not a bit of investor confidence. The investor market is really challenging because in the past interest rates have been 1-2%. So the markets put more money into risk for private equity. And what we're seeing is that risk money is not coming into the market. So we're in a real race here. So we're in a technology race, we're in a funding race. So we've got to get that technology over the line to human cost parity before we lose the funding race. So I don't personally doubt we will get there, but if we lose the race, we won't. A whole lot will in play. And so that worries me, and that's why speed and pace is so important. But there are some perhaps AI, for example, the sort of stuff that isn't great at the time we would like to do here. That's going on that way. So there's lots of factors going on, but we're in a race. So we need to get there. And it's the same around the world. So that all of the startups around the world are in the same race, in the same economic circumstances, whether it's in the UK, the US, or the EU. We're in a race. So to win that race, we particularly need farmers to get involved as well. So we're really pleased with collaboration with Dyson, for example, with their strawberry unit, got robots all over there, Farm and Kent, robots all over there. So we need to, everybody needs to be joining that to win that race. Yeah, we haven't got another 5 years, that's for sure. Okay. I think that's probably done it. We've got one last thing. A young man here called James Pearson, who might be related to me. He's keen to talk to farmers. He's a final year geography student, doing his dissertation and doing a project in farm diversification around energy systems. So he's keen to talk to any farmers in the room. Got a questionnaire, waiting. so let him before he gets you. But I just want to thank everybody for coming today. Everybody online. It's just wonderful to be back and have breakfast. Particularly want to thank Clive, who's navigated the Humber Bridge. Did you come over the bridge?
I didn't.
You didn't. Oh, amazing engineering. You've not used it.
No, you auctioned it, it cost me £2.
Oh, okay. really want to thank Clive for coming down. That's a fantastic talk, Clive. It really is a terrific project. And that's it. So thank you very much indeed. So thank you. Heather, you're going to talk about the next one, are you? Or?
So we had dates on the screen, but the next one is the 26th of January, I think, but I'll send the invites out and call on session.
Is that Lisbon?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you.